Perfect. Yeah, my name is PerOla Malmquist. I'm coming from Helsingborg in Sweden. My first time in Iceland, but in Helsingborg at the fire department we had a lot of exchange with Reykjavik in the 1990s. So I've met some of you, even if I couldn't say who at this point. I'm a fire protection engineer, and I went to University of Lund and University of Maryland. And then I have been working in Helsingborg as a battalion chief, mostly within command and control area of the work. Now I'm running a company called Utkiken, which is a fire and rescue intelligence site for Swedish fire brigades. And I also have some international guests like Birgit here. And what I'm doing, I'm trying to figure out what is coming up for the fire brigade in the coming years, and can I somehow find information about that so they find it at my site when it starts to talk about. And that have been solar panels, and that have been battery fires and so on. But that's just one part of it. One part of it is all the boring stuff with the documents about building regulations and so on. But I'm not going into that. I'm going into this presentation about battery fires. And I'm going to try to put a scientific touch to it. And let's see here.
I'm not sure if we're sharing the slides.
Good. If you take it, that we do it afterwards. Is it working? Yep. Perfect. Yeah, lithium-ion battery fires. I'm going to try to put a scientific touch to it, but also keep it connected with like operational methods and routines. But to start with the battery cell and what it contains a lot of stuff. Of course, it contains electrical energy. And there's an electrolyte in it, which basically is like kerosene. There is carbon, but there's also fluorine, hydrogen, and lithium ions in it. And those are the one that is interesting from the firefighting perspective. There is a weather protection on the battery, the outer casing. And that is maybe basic to know, but it's important because sometimes you hear that there will be lithium metal in the lithium-ion cells, and lithium metal is a very flammable metal. But the weather protection will make sure that there gets no water on the lithium metal if there would be something in the battery cell. And if the battery is opened up, there will be a fire, so the lithium metal will be burned away instantly. There is oxides in the battery, and those oxides will, when heated up, be released and turn into oxygen and contribute to the combustion of the battery. So that's why you could have battery fires burning underwater, because there is still enough oxygen to have it burning. And there is the state of charge in a battery. You can see here on this video, we have a 90% state of charge on the left battery, 60 on the middle one, and 20 on the right one. And I'm heating this to 350 degrees centigrades up to close to the battery. And you will see that the 90% state of charge, when the thermal runaway is here, it's flaming. We get flames instantly. The 60% one, we have only a smoking thermal runaway. And the 20% one, I heated that for 29 minutes before stopping, and nothing happened to it. So the state of charge in the battery could be a good factor to try to find out. That could explain many things. That could explain why one car fire, nothing happens with the battery, and a similar car, you get a full burnout. And that could be due to the state of charge. Explosions. We've been talking about many hazards over the years with the batteries, but explosions, it is the one that have gotten firefighters killed and injured. And I think that is one of the main things we should be concerned about regarding lithium-ion battery fires. On these pictures here we see an electrical ferry from Norway that had a fire in the battery room, and they went down there and they tried to put it out, it didn't work, they went up again, and when they were out from the boat they got an explosion. It was so strong, that explosion, that the car deck went like this. So there's a lot of force in those explosions. The other one below is a garage in the United States. They said it was an explosive event. It suddenly just exploded. And no one could understand that at that point. But it turned out it was an explosion, and it was due to the battery gases. You saw the image when we had 60% state of charge, when we only have smoke. That is the thing when we can get explosion. If we have a flaming thermal combustion, it's no big deal. But if we have the smoke, then it can collect and become to an explosion. The bottom right is a bicycle shed in Helsingborg. My brother, he is a salvage leader. He used to work at the fire brigade too, but now he's working with salvage. And he called me and said, "This is strange, you got to come here. We had a bike fire, and they say it exploded, and it looks like it." So I went there and looked at it, and very well, the battery, the owners heard some puffs, and they went out there. But before they went in, it was a huge, loud bang. And there was an explosion from the bike battery. And it was enough to move the walls of the shed. So I think there is a lot of, like if you read the incident report from that thing, they don't mention explosion. I think there is a lot of explosions that we don't hear about, but it's something that happens many times. And the APS on top is from Arizona. They had a fire in this energy storage systems, and I know Kurt will tell you more about those kinds of fires. Basically what happened was they got there and they made a really good operation. They saw something was wrong. They called out the hazmat team. They started like thinking about how they can do it right. But anyway, when they opened the door, it ignited, and 3 firefighters were really, really badly damaged. One of them were pushed below this fence and landed 25 meters from the container. So there's a lot of force with it. And the first time I saw some experiments on this was from the Finnish Fire Academy. They had made a test with a 1 cubic meter box, and they had an aerosol extinguisher and a battery. And it exploded much more than they anticipated as well. And also in the United States right now, UL Fire and Safety Research Institute are making tests on different situations. And this is a garage fire. You can see it's very clean, there is no smoke. So I think they are working with pure gases. They're working with hydrogen, methane, etc., and make that mix in the garage, and then they try to ignite it and determine, trying to get more knowledge from this. And if we go back to the battery cell and regarding explosions, as I said, the electrical energy is very, very important to determine if there can be an explosion at all. And the electrolyte that contains of hydrocarbons, that is carbon chains with hydrogen hooked onto them, and there is oxygen, of course. But those, the electrical energy from the battery cell, you always say that the energy can never get lost. It can just get transferred to other things or other ways of energy. And what happens here is that the energy from the electrical energy from the battery cell produces heat. And that heat cracks up the carbon chains in the electrolyte. So you get smaller and smaller carbon chains, and you also get hydrogen by itself. So you get hydrogen gas and more easily ignited hydrocarbon gases. And that is basically what creates this explosion issue. If it was just the kerosene or the electrolyte by itself, it wouldn't be a big deal. And the DNV made some tests about this, and they calculated that they will have 30% of the gases produced are pure hydrogen. Carbon monoxide, which is also a flammable gas, between 7 to 30% of the gases produced, and methane 2 to 15%. And it kept on like that with a long list of very flammable gases. And when we talk about gases, we talk about explosion limits. We have a lower explosion limit, an upper explosion limit. At the end there between something, we have the ideal limit when we get the maximum bang for the money. And hydrogen have a very wide explosion area, from 4% to 74%. And it also takes very little energy to get hydrogen to ignite. Carbon monoxide from 12 to 75%, and then we get methane and all the other gases like that. And if we look at it over time, one single cell it produces a couple of liters of flammable gas, so it's not that much. But if we have an indoor area and we have several battery cells releasing its flammable gas, we will by time build up some kind of gas mixture where we reach the lower explosive limit. And if we, in that case, get a heat or enough a flame or spark or something, we will have the explosion. This list here is a list of the gases connected with their auto-ignition temperature. And if we look at the lowest one is ethanol at 365 degrees C, which isn't very much heat. So if we get up to 365 degrees C, and we will get that on the surfaces of the battery cell where we have the smoke releasing eventually. It might not be that much from the beginning, but by time it gets heated up and heated up and heated up, and then we get this ignition. So that's also something that it might not happen immediately, but by the time it builds up the heat, there could be an explosion. And this is the important thing to think about when you're coming to a battery fire. Can you see flames? That's very good, because in that case you are rid of the explosion hazard. If you have smoke, then you have to start a new mindset about that. And this video here is that's a battery fire. It's a Volkswagen ID3 battery module, 50% state of charge, and you see the smoke released here. Quite a bit of smoke, but he had to get very close to be able to ignite it. So if you have very much smoke on the outside, it's just the closest area to where the smoke is produced that you will have this kind of explosion hazard. And also, since it's outside, there will not be a pressure build-up that will be dangerous for you. With normal PPE, that wouldn't be a problem. So, if we have smoke and no fire, we can think about it like a call with release of flammable gas. If we do that, we have a good way to start. And the first thing is to assess the likelihood. Can this be some explosion problem? Like a cell phone in this room, even if there is a lot of smoke, it's too small of a battery cell and too big of a volume. We don't have very much data on it yet, and I hope that is what we will get from the UL Fire and Safety Research Institute. We know that a bike in a small shed can cause an explosion. We know that the battery energy storage systems are likely or possible to cause an explosion. But we have a lot to learn there, what will be a reasonable likelihood. And if we, in that case, treat confined spaces like they can explode, we can define up the no-go zone and hazardous areas and have that as a part of the initial risk assessment for the operation. One way of handling this, like they did in Norway, they had this explosion the first time. A couple of months later, they had a new battery boat that got a fire in the battery room. And they took their time. They made a staff that started thinking about how can we handle this. And they said, we need to inert the volume before we do anything else. So what they did was they took liquid nitrogen and made it to gas and pumped it into the room. And when they had enough liquid nitrogen or nitrogen gas in there so it couldn't burn, then they started to ventilate. And then they flowed nitrogen in and they sucked the air out. And in that way they kept it an inert atmosphere, which is it can't explode. And then they made the operation, and it worked very well. So I think that is a good way to think about it as well. An inertion could be made with gas. It could be made with water fog, water mist. So there are several ways to do that. And also, if you're a little bit, you don't know, could this be explosive or not? Think about where you stand when you open the doors. Don't stand so you get the door on you. Stand on the other side and open like that way, and you get the flames going outwards, and you be in a more safe position. And if we somehow can ventilate the fire early and continuously, then we maybe, depending on the volumes and the flow paths and everything, but maybe we can keep the volume below the lower explosive limit, and in that way make a better operation. Okay. The second thing I would like to talk about is putting out battery fires. And this is something that is said it can't be done. Batteries cannot be extinguished. And here is a video that I made. Also, it's a home-built battery module with several battery cells. And I heat them up until I get combustion. We have a thermal runaway here. Now we have a regular fire from the gases from the battery cell. Now we have a new thermal runaway for a while. And now it's just a regular fire heating up the other battery cells and a new thermal runaway. And the reasons why this is coming so quickly, the thermal runaways, is because I've made the battery pack. I'm not a battery designer, so I have the flames going all over the next batteries. And that is bad for them. Normally, when real designers do it, they take the flames away somewhere else so they don't heat up the adjoining batteries that much. But you see, we have partly of this is just a regular fire. No big deal. And then we have the thermal runaway, and we have the gases and the jet flames. And then it's a regular and a thermal runaway. And this is the part you can use if you want to put out a battery fire. Because when they say you can't put out a battery fire, they mean the single cell. It's very hard to put out a single cell that is in thermal combustion. But it's possible to cool the cells next to them so they don't get heated up above their temperature of when they start their propagation. And that temperature is about 130 to 150 degrees centigrade. So if we can keep the cells below that temperature, that would be perfect. Then we could hinder it from starting to combust. And I was involved in a test this last year, and this is the first time I'm allowed to talk about this, because there have been some industry secrecy about it. And we haven't presented this in Sweden yet, so I'm very happy to be able to tell you about it here. It's a project where we had real vehicle modules. With the question, is it possible to stop the propagation of a thermal runaway in bigger systems? And can we, when we do that, learn and observe things to predict the fire dynamics? So we performed tests on 3 subpacks, and those are the ones you see here. We have 4 pretty large modules, in each of them 7 kilowatt hours, about that per module. And then we have 1 complete battery pack with 24 modules, 67 kilowatt hours, and 1 complete car with 27 modules, 75 kilowatt hours. And the organization behind this was the Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency that made it together with a couple of companies. It was Floby that produces fire trucks. It was Cobra that produces the cutting extinguisher. We lent the Muro lens, the German lens to penetrate battery packs that is made for that. We tried to get the Rosenbauer jack to try that, but that was not available when we did the test, so we couldn't try that one out. In all the cases, we had 100% state of charge. And here is what it looked like. We started the fire with heating pads on the battery modules. And then our goal was to have it spread from one module to a second module, and then we should start extinguishing it. It turned out it was very hard to determine when we have a spread to the second module. So the first test here, when we thought, you can see the black area on the battery pack, and with the thermal imaging camera, we looked at it all the time, and we thought, now we have this spread to the second pack. But it didn't, when we opened it, it hadn't spread to the second pack. So here we have the cutting extinguisher, and what you can look at here is that when you penetrate the battery pack, we don't get any flames like that from the minute we have penetrated. There will be some puffs and smokes now afterwards, and that can be due to that we have some battery cells that still were on the process of becoming thermally unstable and get a thermal event. Our theory here was that we were going to let the water flow and not hunt the thermal event. Let the water flow, cool the battery cells where it reaches, and then just let it flow until we look at the thermal imaging image that we don't have much spread anymore. And this is about how exciting that was. Nothing more happened. We observed it for 15 minutes to see if we get new increases in temperature. And if we got that, we filled up with some more water. He don't want to stop, but she said it was okay to stop. Now he stopped. And this is about what we saw on the thermal imager. It's very hard to decide, but what you can see is you can see if you get increases in heat or if you get new areas that are heated. And we didn't get that from this one. So we stopped, observed it for 15 minutes, and then we put it away for 3 days, and no reignition during this time. And when we inspected the battery packs, we had 3 modules that were totally unburnt and one module that was damaged. The second test here, same test, the mirror lens instead. We let it go a little bit longer because we really wanted it to have spread to the second module. And what you can see here when you look at it is that the smoke always takes the same path in this situations here. Like where you have gotten a leak from the start, the smoke and flames tends to go the same way. And now they're bringing up the mirror lens, and they're gonna hit it with a sledgehammer to get it in. And there is a little bit of like this on the lens, so it doesn't get too deep. It's not supposed to damage more battery cells than you reach on the first 2 or 3 inches down into the battery pack. And this is how exciting this got. Nothing more happened when we have flooded the battery. And the flow from the mirror lens is very small. In this case, we had 25 liters per minute. So it's not the large flow that determines if you have success or not. It's that you get the flow to cool the batteries around it. And I guess the limit you get for the flow, what you need is how big holes you have in the battery pack. If you have large holes in the battery pack, you might not succeed because all the battery will flow the wrong way. Let's see. Oh, I thought I was gonna. Okay. We had about the same damage from on the battery cells like we had on before. This was a test where we used a pike axe to make a hole. And then we put down a small copper tube into the battery module. This is not intended that we think we should gonna use that method because those tools are not intended for, and it can be dangerous if you do it in the real world. But we had made an assessment that it's okay in this case. And what you should look at is the difference that when we make a hole first and then we put the water in, we will have new thermal events and more flames during that. Our way of thinking when approaching was that I can go there if I avoid the areas where we have had the large flames before. And when I make a new hole, it will release the vapor through that hole. And since the axe is narrow, the flames will go upwards. And it turned out right. For the safety, we had a guy with a nozzle that if I get flames on me, I was gonna just walk back and he would cool me down. And you see this, we have one burn through on the lid, and that is from the electrical contacts between the bus bars in the battery and the lid. There can be short circuits and arcing there that can make it burn through. It can also be that the battery modules shoot their flames straight up that way. And now Lena is telling me that we have the thermal imaging here. You probably hit some not damaged cells here. And here you see we hit some cells that hasn't burned. So it's very hard to determine where to be on the exact spot. And it turned out that wasn't so important to be exactly right. And now what you can see here, when I put the nozzle into the battery pack, you can see that we still have flames and water through that hole. Here we had 70 liters per minute, so still no large flow. And the thing is to be patient here too, so we can let the water flow and do its job. And that was about how important, or how that looked, nothing more. And here, same thing, we had two battery modules that were completely intact, and one that was partly damaged, and then one was totally damaged. And when we said a prediction, can we predict things by looking at things? And the thought here is, if we go to a burning electric vehicle, and we make sure that there are no persons in danger, and we have protected the exposures so we don't get spread to something else. If we then are a little bit cool and observe and see what happens, because I think that many times you will get to a battery fire, there might be nothing showing from the batteries, because the battery designers are so good today that there could be like 5 and 10 minutes initially between different cells in the battery pack. And by being cool when we get there and observe, we can see where are the what do you call those? The pressure release openings, because that's where we will have the main flames coming. So if we observe and we see where we have the main flames coming, we can say that we will not get, or we are not supposed to stand at those places. And we did that for one of the fires here. And on this image, after 4 minutes, we see the smoke. We could see where we had the most of the smoke, and that was from the pressure relief valves. We could see after next time that we had flames from another opening where we had a lot of smoke the time before. And it went on like this. And the openings that we had in the battery pack, where we had like between the lid and the pack, where those openings remained as well. And the size of the flames seemed to be pretty same size. And that made us say that this area is not, we can't say it's a safe zone, because there can always be new holes and burn new holes and stuff like that. But we can say it's the least dangerous zones. So here is the way to go if we want to approach the vehicle. Then we tried the full pack. Here we have a 24 modules pack, 67 kilowatt hours. And we decided to do this with the same method, with an axe and some water from a regular hose line. And we burned we let it burn, so we had 15 minutes from initial start until we started this. So we were sure that we had an ongoing propagation within the battery pack. And when we hit a new cell, then it's just flames for a while, but then it gets cool again, and we can expand the hole. Here you can see the guy with the nozzle here was the safety man. So I think that is something you should think about if you consider using a method for putting out EV fires. The safety man should be have a nozzle to take care of eventual jet flames you will get. Now it's a regular straight stream nozzle, and we just open it a little bit, so it's about 70 liters of flow here as well, and let it flow. And in this battery we have spread to modules on both, from what you see at the lower side and the upper side. So we had modules burning on both sides. So we are not at all close to all the burning cells. And that does not get more interesting than this either. When we open that pack, you can see the green numbers are the cells where we had energy left, and the red one is the totally broken. You can see that we have broken or burned cell on both sides of the battery pack, but there was a lot of unscathed cells. So that makes us think that it's worth doing it. You can, even if you're not saving anything of value, you're preventing a lot of pollution from the battery pack by not having them burning. And we measured on the extinguishing water as well. And the extinguishing water from that we analyzed had nothing different from a regular car fire. So from that perspective, we should treat them equal, fossil fuel fires and electrical fires. The full car fire, I'm not allowed to show you yet. We're waiting for acceptance to show that. Same ignition by heat pads.
We won't tell anybody.
That's good. I'm going to send it to you as soon as I get it, or I get the allowance. 15 minutes before start extinguishing, and that meant that we had the entire car burning. So it was a full car fire, and if you would show up to the scene now after 10 minutes or 12 minutes, you would not really see that it was a battery fire. You could see sometimes that you had flames, jet flames, but it would look like a regular car fire to you, and you would probably notice it when you started realizing that you couldn't put it out totally. We used a combination of regular nozzle for putting out the car fire, and then we used a cutting extinguisher for penetrating and flooding the battery. 750 liters total, and 10 minutes of water. 5 minutes of those were with the cutting extinguisher to put out the battery pack. So it was 300 liters of water to put out the battery pack. After analyzing it, you can see that we have so many more cells that are intact. We had fire on several places in the battery pack, but still the cutting extinguisher took care of flooding the battery enough to stop the propagation of the thermal runaway. And what we always hear when talking about this method is that penetrating the battery pack will give new thermal runaways. And it might be so, but by adding water at the same time as penetrating, those thermal runaways will be no big deal. It's nothing that will keep spreading the fire to new modules or something, because the water will cool the surrounding of that battery cell. It's hard to hit the exact location of the cell in failure, or the cells in failure. And that is right. But I think we have showed here that it's not that important. If we can get water into the battery pack and have it flow, that will take care of it. What to be aware of is the rescue sheets of the car could be very important here, because you could have battery configurations where you have several packs where you can't get water flowing from one pack to the other, so you need to figure out which one is burning. And the rescue sheets in general is a very good thing to use to try to figure out how it's configured. But also combined with the thermal imaging camera and the observations of smoke and flames, those three together are very good. Adding water to the battery pack can cause more problems than a single cell failure. I spoke about that earlier, that single cell failures is probably the most likely event we will have with at least the more modern EVs we have. They are so good at building the battery packs that they are designed to handle a single cell failure. And that means you can have a single cell, thermal event, lots of smoke, they will call the fire brigade, and when you get there, there is nothing more showing. So in that case, it would be stupid to make a hole in the battery pack. You need to have a method that takes care of single cell failures without destroying the batteries, like starting with protecting exposures, getting things out of the vehicle to do a penetration but not starting, and then not until you see that this is an ongoing event, then you could use a method to penetrate the battery pack. It takes expensive tools, and not every fire brigade can afford that, and that is a good point. We don't have very many EV fires today. And if you don't have many EV fires, maybe you shouldn't buy stuff for putting them out this way. You might have a good method, just protecting exposures and moving vehicles and whatever you do. But the interesting thing here, as I see it, is that it is a working method that maybe not all the times, but many times can work. And there might be occasions when you would like to have a very short period of time for the fire. For example, a parking garage fire under a building with people in them. If you can put it out in 5 minutes instead of 2 hours, you could be in a very good position at that fire. But it's important to know that it's not a universal method for everything. It's a part of the toolbox where you maybe could use this one. Another one is what we hear from when we talk to vehicle manufacturers, that there will be new battery type with much higher energy density. And will this really work there? And the answer would be, we don't know. Higher energy density means two things. It means the batteries are packed tighter together, not much room for the water to flow, they say. And the other thing is the battery chemistry will contain more energy, which will make the fires more intense. But water is a very good coolant. And the force from the initial thermal runaway will make a pressure increase in the battery pack. And that will lift the lid, it will make the gases go somewhere, and you will have the overpressure relief valves. And probably, but I don't know since we haven't tested it, but probably that where the gases can go, the water can flow. So we might have success even with high energy density batteries. But that's for the future to tell. There can be more than 800 volts in a battery pack. Isn't this method very dangerous? It is. It's true. It can be very dangerous if you don't use the correct tools and the correct methods. And we have had some electrical experts looking at this, and they found two dangerous occasions with this. One was if the vehicle is connected to a charger, then the body of the vehicle is grounded to earth. So you can become a closed circuit with the battery. Not likely, but in an unlikely situation it could happen. So that means you have to disconnect the vehicle from the charger. If you can't disconnect it from the charger, you shouldn't use this method. The second thing they identified was that if you get, and this is very unlikely, but it could potentially happen, that the penetration of the battery would hit 800 volts of a positive bar, And a negative pole would be connected to the outer casing of the battery pack, and thereby grounding to the chassis. And that means that you, with the penetration, wouldn't touch the casing of the battery, which is unlikely, because if you touch the casing, you would get an arcing in there, and the high currents would go there. But as we said, we need to deal with that, and how is that possible? One is don't touch the body of the car when penetrating, and use tools made for the things that are insulated. Because then we have the very small likelihood that it will be a closed circuit together with insulated tools. Then we have two levels of protection, or at least one good level of protection. By piercing the battery, you will destroy the car. Batteries are designed to handle thermal runaways in single cells, and that's what I said before. We probably will have several calls where you get there and they say it's smoke and flames and everything, and then you see nothing more. The car have dealt with the problem itself. And that's good, but you can prepare and protect exposures and so on. And this is the interesting one, I think, that auto manufacturers warn against penetrating batteries. We have been, from MSB, the Swedish Civil Contingency Agency, tried to figure out why they warn about this. And we can't get any answers. They say it's dangerous, but they don't say why. We say, well, define this closed circuit where we will be a part of the closed circuit so we can learn from you. And they just say it's dangerous. So my thoughts, without knowing, is that much of this is about liability. Car manufacturers can probably get sued if they would recommend that, maybe. But we don't know. What our studies have shown is that we can do it in a safe manner when using the correct tools and the correct methods. And that was my 45 minutes, yes.
Just a small question about the cutting extinguisher. Was there any concern using the abrasive materials?
We used the abrasive for like 5 seconds to penetrate, and then we turned the abrasive off and just flooded with water. And the concern we had before was that we were afraid that we were going through the pack and get out on the other side. But we didn't. It stayed in the battery compartment. Any more questions?
Yes, one here. In recent years, we've been
Takk fyrir. Thank you for an interesting presentation. In recent years, there have been a lot of fire brigades implementing CAFS system 1.7, and what are your thoughts on using that on car fires relating to explosive gases trapped under the foam?
Yeah. I don't know if I haven't thought about that. I wouldn't see it as like the explosion hazard will be there. The CAFs will not put out the fire unless you put it inside the battery pack. And what we have found out is that water is good enough. So we didn't want to introduce more things into the battery pack. No, I'll pass on that one. I don't know.
Very much for this presentation. I'm wondering a little bit about this. I was wondering about Cobra and this. When you pull it, can you destroy something more in the battery pack if you didn't use the abrasive?
Yeah, you will destroy cells.
Yeah,
and those cells will go into thermal runaway.
Yep.
but they will not be a flaming thermal runaway, no problem with it. And you might destroy a bus bar if you go through that, but since the battery is already destroyed, it's no big deal.
And then a second question about these containers or some packing to put the car inside to let them stay in water. What are your thoughts about that?
I think you need to have a full thought from the fire to when you place the vehicle outside a car repair shop or whatever you do. How to transport it, how to, where to place it in a safe way. And that might be a container and it might be something else. I'm not sure because if the fire brigade do this, they need to take care of the water you have in it and pay for the destruction of it. And that might be a way to do it, but I'm not convinced that it's the most optimal way of doing it when we learn more and more.
Maybe PerOla can add to it. You have said about overpressure valves, and this is very important to know, is it a battery fire or not? Sometimes we have fires that can be an ordinary fire that goes to the battery. So it's not up to every time put the vehicle into the container, because afterwards your water can go into through the overpressure valves into the battery and you can cause a fire.
That's right.
So this is something that the overpressure valves are very, very important to see. So what we are working on this with ISO, and I will tell this more about, is that this is very good. Everything you tell today, we are working on with the manufacturers on ISO level. So this is very good connection. Thank you. Very good presentation, PerOla.